I can honestly say that I've never been through anything even remotely close to this experience. Perhaps, those of you that were here following Katrina, I'm sure that there was a lot of adjustments you had to make and dealing with those kinds of factors. But me personally, in my entire coaching career, I have never dealt with anything remotely close to this experience. When everything happened back on beginning March 12th or March 11th, actually, the day we played South Alabama. You all know the sequence of things that occurred. And on that Thursday, it was the Friday morning, we had the meeting with the athletic director. And then at noon, we received an email from LSU's administration saying that we couldn't, beginning at 5 p.m. on that Friday, we could not have gatherings of 30 or more people. That was about 1:30-ish or so. I sent a text message to our team and told them to come and clean out their lockers. They had till 3:30 to do that. And then at 4 o'clock, they were going to all call in for a conference call. I couldn't even meet with the team in person because, of course, it was in excess of 30 people. So we had to do it by conference call. I went over to the athletic administration building up on the 6th floor conference room to do the call. They had a box here on the table. We had our whole coaching staff there. Dan Gaston, our our associate athletic director, was there. And, here I am having a team meeting, talking to a box. That had never happened before to me. We went back, when I say we, the staff went back to our offices when that conference call was over. And we sat in my office and we talked for the next 2 or 3 hours about next year's roster, those type of things, the draft and how it was going to impact us and so forth. Conversations that typically we would have in May or June, we're now having on March the 13th. And about 7 o'clock that evening, I turned to the guys and I said, okay, I think we've done enough on this tonight. Let's go home, and I'll see you guys in a month. That was March 13th, and now I don't even know if I'll see him in a month. I don't know if April 15th will be the day we get back together or not. It doesn't sound like it. So I actually had my very first Zoom experience yesterday, and that was basically a staff meeting. So there was a lot of interaction with the guys, but I never thought I'd ever hold a press conference from my bedroom. I never thought I'd have a staff meeting by virtual, what do you call this? I don't know, Zoom. I mean, by looking at it at a computer screen. So, I've talked to many of our players by FaceTiming them. I've talked to recruits and texted with recruits, but nothing like this has ever happened to me before in my career as a coach.
Coach, Zach Nunez from Tiger TV. Now that you have a bit of a clear idea that, your players are going to get another year of eligibility, how does that going to affect the amount of scholarships the NCAA is going to let y'all use, or have they not informed y'all about that yet?
Well, Zach, first of all, I'm glad the NCAA did what they did. I think it was the appropriate thing to do. It has minimal effect on us in the baseball program. We only had 2 seniors on our team, Matthew Beck and Aaron George, which is very typical of an SEC baseball team. If you're recruiting a high caliber type of player, professional prospect type players, typically you lose the great majority of them after their junior year. And that was the case with us. Not that Matthew Beck and Aaron George weren't vital players to our team. They were very productive middle relief pitchers for us, and I want them back, and they both want to come back, and they'll be very vital players to our team. But so many of our guys are pro prospects, so really the thing that most affects us is the professional draft. on this past Monday, the NCAA made their announcement, but the previous Friday was actually more interest to me than even what was going to happen on Monday. And last Friday, Major League, of course, there was a lot of scuttlebutt talk that there may not even be a draft at all. And so they made it clear that there was going to be a draft. It was the negotiations between the Major League Players Association and management, the owners. I think the owners didn't really want to have a draft at all. And I think it was a concession they made to the Major League Baseball Players Association, but they only have to draft 5 rounds. I can go into this a little bit more, but just knowing there was going to be a draft was kind of a major happening in our world of college baseball, especially in the SEC and here at LSU. So once I knew there was going to be a draft of at least 5 rounds, in my mind, in my heart, I felt that we would probably lose a couple of our current players, specifically Daniel Cabrera and Cole Henry. And then I felt that we would probably lose at least a couple of our recruiting class. I don't really want to mention names right now, but so that would be if there was 5 rounds. But what they didn't make clear was how many rounds there would be. They didn't make clear when the draft would actually occur. And so even though we know there's a draft, it still didn't answer all the questions that we have. Now, when the NCAA made their decision, that certainly impacts us to some degree. Certainly we get the 2 extra spots on our roster for Beck and George. And people say, well, all your juniors will continue to be juniors, and therefore they'll still have leverage in the draft next year. But the way professional baseball looks at it, they'll be 22 years old a year from now instead of 21, so they may not have as much leverage as they think that they will have. Does that mean that players on our team that would have been drafted in the 6th to 10th round that now will go undrafted, that could sign for a maximum of $20,000, would they be more apt to sign? I think each individual kid can only answer that question. You know, I've had some conversations with guys, and I can tell you that there's a wide range of the way that they all are looking at it. Some of them will be so desperate to sign, they'll take whatever they can get, even if they're undrafted, and maybe it's only $20,000. Others are saying, no, well, I'm not going to sign for that. If I'm not drafted and I don't get at least so many dollars, I'll come back for what would have been their senior year, but it'd be their junior year repeated. So there's still a lot of questions out there, Zach, about whether, what our roster is going to look like. It's maybe 10 or 20% more clarity based on last Friday's announcement and this Monday's announcement, but there's still so many things that are, up in the air because there's no definitive answers. And I'm still holding out hope as well that maybe the NCAA will look at baseball specifically and give us a little bit more relief when it comes to scholarship numbers and roster size besides the seniors. Because really, if the NCAA wants to do college baseball right, they need to look at our junior class as though that's our senior class. The senior class for softball or another sport where there's not a draft is one thing, but the senior class versus the junior class in baseball is totally different.
Yeah, Paul, Ron Higgins, Tiger Rag.
Hey, Ron.
First of all, I'm complimenting you on your wallpaper in your bedroom. The LSU Sports Stat wallpaper in your bedroom is great.
Technology's great, isn't it?
Yeah, really. Even
we'll give credit to Brandon Berrio for that.
Even your corporate sponsor on your wall in your bedroom. The scholarship stuff with the NCAA, are you pretty hopeful? I mean, obviously you have a recruiting class you'd like to bring in, and you have 2 seniors that will come back. Are you hopeful that they'll, like you said, they'll increase this thing at least for 1 year?
I'm very hopeful, Ron. Now, if is my hope misplaced? Am I being, rose-colored glasses? I can tell you that this past Tuesday, Greg Sankey had a conference call with all the SEC baseball coaches. And obviously this topic was a very prevalent thing to discuss. And unfortunately, Greg didn't have any answers. He's, the commissioner of a conference, the most powerful conference in the country, but still he can't just arbitrarily say, yes, we're going to give relief to baseball. But I think he's going to trigger some discussion along with his staff in the SEC office, the NCAA rules guys that work in the SEC office. I think they're going to put some stuff together and try to make some inroads with the decision makers in the NCAA. The person that I deal with on our campus with all of our scholarships, our senior women administrator, Miriam Seeger. I just had a long talk with her yesterday morning. And even Miriam said to me after I talked to her about a bunch of different scenarios, she even said, boy, you guys need to have 2 or 2.5 more scholarships, at least for this year, just to give you guys some relief to make this work. So I got Miriam Seeger at least in our corner here. Hopefully she can yield some influence on somebody. But I'm not the only coach that's dealing with this. There's going to be a lot of coaches that are dealing with this situation. And, I'm hoping that maybe at least for a year, they'll give us a little bit of relief, let us have a couple of more scholarships, maybe a handful more spots added to our 27 scholarship guys, and see if we, eventually it works its way out over the course of the next couple years.
Hey, Paul, can you talk about being on a live radio show and finding out the season was completely kaput, and what was that like? Was that just one of the more shocking things you've ever experienced?
It was really surreal. I thought, Ed's speaking about, I was a guest on the Paul Feinbaum show, SEC Network, but I was doing it by phone. And we were about 30 seconds, I think, into the interview when he dropped the bomb on me, telling me that the College World Series had been canceled. That's literally how I found out. And I thought he was kidding. I did, and at that time, a lot of people thought, why are they pulling the trigger on this thing so soon? Obviously, they had a lot of information that the rest of us didn't, and certainly they made the right decision. You can see that, I saw the British Open was canceled. I saw, all these different events are being canceled, and this crisis is pretty extensive as it can probably be. So, I was shocked. And, in all honesty, you just took a hard swallow and you started to think, Ed, what does this mean? Does this mean the season is over? Does this mean, my mind was racing in a million different directions, and I'm still trying to answer questions live on the show. But as soon as I hung up, I wanted our players to hear from me. So I texted a mass text to our team as soon as I hung up the phone with Paul Feinbaum to say they just made an announcement that the College World Series was canceled, but everybody hold tight. Don't panic yet. Perhaps we'll still play for an SEC championship, and that'll be the ultimate goal this year. But of course, as time went on, that we realized that was not going to happen. So it was shocking, but again, as I've said 1,000 times to people, I think perspective is the most important word that we have to have right now. There's people losing their lives. There's people losing their fortunes, their retirements. They're losing their jobs. There's a lot of things that are going on in the world right now that are a lot more important than college baseball. And we all know that, but it's what we do, and it's our livelihood, and it's these youngsters, one time in their life that they get to go through this period of time. And so I'm not underplaying how much it impacts me or our staff or our players, but we have to keep it all in perspective.
Coach, from a recruiting standpoint with the draft, how does it change for you? Because there's always years where you have to sweat out certain guys and they have numbers in their head. But
Yeah.
with the 5 rounds and you only get $100,000 up front, it's in phases. How does that change your approach with the 2020 recruiting class come draft time?
Well, first of all, we don't know it's going to be 5 rounds. And I think the difference between 5 rounds and 10 rounds is very significant. In our recruiting class, we've probably got 3, maybe 4 guys that I think are capable of being drafted first or second round. Probably have another guy that's probably a 3rd round draft choice. Now, will they be selected there? I don't know. If the draft's only 5 rounds and you're a major league team scouting director, would you spend all 5 of your picks on college guys, or would you take a chance on a young kid that's, you don't know what he's going to eventually do? Do you go the more sure, quote unquote, nothing's for sure, but do you go with the more seasoned guy that you can make a better assessment of? So I don't know if some of those guys that I could have told you were 1st to 3rd round draft choices in our recruiting class, will they really be picked there? Or will they stick by their guns? Some of them might be, in a major league scouting director's mind, a 2nd round pick, but he's not going to sign unless he gets 1st round money. We see that happen a lot of times. I don't know that there's going to be as much ability by the major league teams in a 5 round draft to be able to play with their money within those 5 rounds, even to overpay one player and underpay another to, with their pool of money. So again, we don't know what's going to happen. Now, if the draft is 10 rounds, I don't think the impact of it going from 40 rounds to 10 rounds is as great as it would be 40 rounds to 5 rounds. I don't know if people agree with me or not, but that's just my personal feeling. Our current players, I think we've got 2 or 3 guys that fall into that 5th to 10th round area. Again, like we talked about before when I was answering Zach's question, does a player say, well, I'll sign as a 5th rounder, but I won't sign if I get passed up and I would have been gone in the 6th round. Some guys may, some guys may not. Recruiting wise, I think it's the same thing. Some guys, are going to get picked where they should get picked, and they're probably going to sign. And I think others, it may affect them. Now, if they do 10 rounds, I don't know. I don't know how much of a difference it's going to be, because really the first 10 rounds in any draft in past years were the most significant rounds. Certainly there were guys that were drafted in the 15th round or the 30th round that they could overpay. Well, they can't overpay those guys now. So there will be some impact, but not as much as it would have been if there was just a 5-round draft. And I don't know what it's going to be. My gut feeling kind of tells me, and I don't know, Kendall, I see you're on this call. Maybe you know even better than me, but my gut feeling tells me that Major League Baseball is just going to continue to monitor this crisis. And are the minor league seasons in danger? If they don't have minor league seasons, then they're not going to have any place to send these players to play. So why would you go beyond 5 rounds, sign up players, and then not really be able to send them anywhere to play in anyway? So I think that's why Major League Baseball is not given for sure how many rounds there'll be, nor have they given a date. I think they're trying to stall it out as long as they can to see if they're even going to have a New York Penn League or a Gulf Coast League or, the low minors type of minor leagues. So it affects, the recruiting is virtually done for this year, but it affects, how we're going to piece the roster together. And we're looking at plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, but until we get a little bit more direction, it's kind of hard to make any final decisions.
Paul, how concerned are you overall for college baseball in general? Obviously, at LSU, you're in a better position financially than a lot of other athletic programs are. And to that end, do you think when you try to piece together your non-conference schedule for 2021, I don't know where you are with that. Well, might you be influenced by that? Maybe you might have some concerns about some programs, whether they'll be able to play or not.
Well, Scott, let me tell you that that's certainly something I've thought a lot about. In fact, I spent all my morning today scheduling our midweek non-conference games for 2022 season. So our 2021 schedule is completed already. It hasn't been approved by the LSU athletic department or university faculty board, but we've had it done. It's been done for quite some time. But the weekends are already scheduled for 22, 23, 24. Yeah, so we're going to have to see obviously what happens, but there's a bigger picture than just LSU's non-conference schedule. I mean, just the health and the future of college baseball is of concern. If football season gets canceled in the fall, I mean that, I don't know if you can say anything is worst case scenario. I mean, anytime you say that's the worst case scenario, it seems like it gets worse after that, lives and, the numbers that the president was talking about this week of the amount of lives that can be lost in the United States is, just, I don't even know the word to describe how I felt when I heard him saying numbers like 100,000 to 240,000 people could die from this. It makes you not think so much about college baseball, how important is college baseball. But if college football gets canceled and all of that revenue doesn't come in, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that belts are going to have to be tightened all around the country. And, the problem with our sport is there's just not a lot of teams that are self-sufficient like LSU is. We can pay for ourselves, but there's not many schools that do that. So now within those institutions, I mean, there's a lot of institutions, almost half of the 300 Division I playing schools don't even offer 11.7 scholarships because that's an institutional decision. So now what happens when they're already taking a hit because the NCAA basketball tournament was canceled, and the disbursement of that money is less than people had planned on. So how do schools decide to tighten the budgets? I mean, I hate even to utter the words, because you worry about just the very future of programs around the country. And I don't want to speculate, Scott, because it's being a pessimist, and I don't want to be that way. I'm hoping that people are going to find a way, and programs are going to be able to survive. If programs don't survive and they were on our schedule, we'll roll with it and we'll figure out what to do. But I'm not making any alternative plans at this point.
Paul, will you be a little more, let's say next February, you have a player in your locker room who has a cold or maybe the flu or something like that. Will this affect, no matter what happens going forward, affect the way you do business as far as having your players all in the locker room? Or, I know that's kind of a wide encompassing question, but what do you do as a coach to make sure that your guys are protected as much as they can from this?
And you're talking about something that I would have no idea. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Maybe by then they have come up with a vaccine to protect us all from this virus. So I hadn't even thought about that kind of a thing. In all honesty, it's a scary thought to think that you're going to have to coach your players differently because they can't be close to each other in the locker room, or what's going to happen with the people that come to the games in the stands. I mean, has life changed for us as we know it going forward? I mean, I don't know the answer to those questions. People a lot smarter than I hopefully are getting closer to answers, and that's all we can hope for. But it's a legitimate question that I just don't have a very good answer for you because I hadn't even thought about it to that degree.
Coach Andrew Clay, KTC in Lafayette. I want to go back to the draft talk a little bit quick and ask about juniors. They seem to have unique situation where they kind of have some leverage now with 3 shots at the draft as opposed to just 2 shots. Do you think that benefits them and benefits teams across the country?
I think if you talk to anybody in professional baseball, Andrew, they're going to say, yeah, they have more leverage because they're only juniors and they can go back to school, but they're a year older. So that neutralizes any leverage that they probably have. And I think that's somewhat of a real concern. I've always wondered why professional baseball looks at a guy that's 22 years old and thinks he's an old man, but a 21-year-old is a young man. Does 1 year really make that kind of difference? And there's lots of examples of guys that have signed at 22 years old and have made it to the major leagues and have had really good careers in the major leagues. But remember, professional baseball is trying to sign players for as low amount of money as they possibly can. So they're going to say those things to a player. If you go back to school, it's not really, or your threat to go back to school after your second junior year is really not that valid because of your age. So I don't know if it really is a great benefit. I think if any of us had their choice, we would have rather just life go on as normal and attrition would have happened in its natural way. But I think the NCAA made the proper decision to allow these kids to come back. I mean, we only played 17 games. We hadn't even played an SEC game yet. And I know if I was 21 years old and in my junior year in college and I had that year washed away after, not even a third of your schedule has been played, I'd be pretty upset. So I think the NCAA made the right decision from that standpoint. Whether or not it actually turns out to be silver lining or something of more benefit. I don't know that it'll be of more benefit. I think it's nice that they get the year back, but I don't think it's going to help them from the draft standpoint at all.
Hey, Coach. I guess kind of getting back to your players for a second, do you what kind of, advice or kind of strategy are you guys giving them while they're away in terms of workouts and trying to keep up their games right now?
We're really leaving it up to them because a lot of them, in all honesty, are finding it difficult to find places even to work out. Where I live, there's a soccer complex behind me. And I take a run in the morning, and keep my distance from there. But there's hardly anybody ever out there. But every so often I'll see a couple of kids, baseball players, whether they're high school or college kids. I don't know who they are, but they'll be out in the middle of a soccer field just playing catch. I've talked to several of our players that just don't have facilities to go to. All these workout complexes are closed. I was talking to Saul Garza this morning. He and his father are putting up a makeshift batting cage in their backyard just so he can swing the bat some. They just don't, you hate to encourage them or try to tell them that they should be doing something when they don't even have facilities that they can utilize to do the things that they would need to do. We have all of our players scheduled to go play in the summer, but we don't even know if there's going to be collegiate summer leagues yet. I mean, they haven't made any announcements about canceling Cape Cod or the Northwoods League or anything else, but it wouldn't surprise me at some point if that happened. They don't have minor leagues. They don't have Major League Baseball going on. How are they going to have collegiate summer leagues going on? So this may be something that is going to last a lot longer than any of us had ever dreamt that it would. And we just kind of got to keep rolling with it. I mean, our strength coach gave each of our kids a program that they could do where they, do them at their house using their own body weight, so to speak. They don't have to have facilities to work out, trying to just, keep them physically fit. I know I've talked to a couple of our players that have, found places to hit in batting cages. I FaceTimed with Zach Mathis the other day out in Stockton, California. He was actually out on a field with a friend of his, and they were throwing to each other because, he was just out there taking batting practice. They're doing what they can do, but I think it's limited what they can do, and I'm not really overly concerned with it right now. Of course, our season is not until the spring. I think fall sports would probably be a little bit more concerned with this.
Yeah, Paul, Ron Higgins again, Tiger Rag. Besides making your non-conference schedule out for the next 15 years, we have all this time. What are you doing with your time during the day? Besides that, and checking in on Rocco, your new grandson.
Well, that, in all honesty, Ron, that's probably been the most difficult thing. I have this new grandson, and I went over that Saturday. We were supposed to be at Ole Miss. I drove to New Orleans and got to hold him for the first time. But we haven't been back, just as a precaution. I even my two grandchildren right here in Baton Rouge, I'm not even going to visit them. So in all honesty, I haven't done much. I've hardly left the house. I told you I'd go out and take a run in the morning just to get some exercise. I've watched about every rerun of a movie that I've ever watched in my life, I think. Get the Major League Baseball Network has played some games of interest to me. I got to watch Bucky Dent hit his 3-run homer against the Red Sox again. Remember when he did that during my senior year in college? Bucky was my favorite player. He had played his junior college ball for my dad, and he was my idol. So that was a thrilling thing to be able to watch that game all over again. But, I've just been sitting with the computer in my lap trying to organize things for the future. I've been staring at that depth chart for so many hours. I think I'm going to go blind looking at that screen, constantly. I try to communicate with players, our staff, and doing nothing terribly exciting. And what are you doing what are you doing all day?
Basically, it's, thinking of story ideas and trying to find people who want to talk. At least now, when you call somebody, they're usually there. So that's the good part of it. Other than that, I like you watch movies, catch up on TV series, and people I know check it.
It almost feels like the Twilight Zone, doesn't it? I mean, it's so surreal. You go outside and you think life is normal, and then you come in and you put on the news again, and you hear everything that's going on, and you realize that it's April and you're not on the baseball field. And for first time in my conscious life, I can remember not being on a baseball field. I mean, since I was probably 5 years old, I spent almost every day of April on a baseball field, whether I was in the dugout with my dad's teams or playing high school, playing college, playing pro ball, coaching high school, coaching college, and now April. And it's just, I'm sure every one of you that are on this call can tell your own stories. My life is not any more unique than anybody else's. It's just been really hard, and it sounds like it's not going to be ending anytime soon. That's the scary thing.
To that end, Paul, you're supposed to play Vanderbilt this weekend. Have you found yourself kind of thinking about it's still in a game mode, thinking about batting lineups and pitching matchups and things like that?
Scott, only for next year. I didn't even realize this was the weekend we were going to play Vanderbilt. I've tried, for me, the 2020 season ended, and I actually was communicating with a coach yesterday. I think it was might have been the UL Monroe coach. I guess maybe last night we were supposed to play them. I didn't even know that because for me, 2020 was over. And I think he said something about we should be in Baton Rouge tonight playing you. And I said, wow, it was tonight the night we were going to play. I didn't even realize it. That Vanderbilt series was going to be so exciting. I had heard, 2 months ago that all the games were sold out to the hilt and people were paying $200 for tickets on StubHub, and it was going to be so exciting. You got the defending national champions coming in, and the Alec Box Stadium was going to be hopping, and it was, how can you not be excited about that stuff? And, the rug got pulled out from under us. And I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about what's been lost from this season as much as I've been spending time preparing for next season and letting that be my dominant thinking. I think if I keep thinking about what we've lost, it would put me into a depressive state, and I don't want to be that way regarding the having lost out on the baseball season. I'm depressed enough about what's going on in the world, believe me.
Hey, Paul, Brian Hall with NBC 33. In case like with Daniel Cabrera, he's probably like a lot of juniors who, had a lot of the skills and a lot of the things that project well to the major leagues, but a lot riding on that junior season. How do you kind of begin to counsel him? And obviously he probably represents a lot of people right now who were really hoping for big things from this season.
Well, as far as Daniel with the draft, I don't think it's going to hurt him. I think Daniel has done enough in his career, not only here at LSU, but playing for the USA team. He's been scouted tremendously, and he was off to a great start this year. He played great over in the Minute Maid ballpark tournament. The Shriners hit the home run against Texas. He hit balls to the opposite field with authority. I mean, he looked like a big leaguer out there. So I don't think Daniel is going to be hurt too much with the draft, and I don't think Cole Henry will be hurt too much with the draft as well. He pitched really magnificent this year, and I'm more sad for those kids just losing out on a full season of their LSU experience. Cole is a draft eligible sophomore. And of course, last year, his season was up and down because of arm soreness. And then he, really got it going. And then we're in the super regional. We beat Florida State. We're going to go to Omaha, and he has to come out of the game after 2 innings, which certainly affected that game and our hopes for going to Omaha last year. But it also took away some experiences that he was going to be able to have. And then this year he's been feeling great. He's been throwing the ball really well. I still think he had more in him. I think his breaking ball is a little bit inconsistent this year. And it was, he was just starting to get it going, tighten it up a little bit. And I think he would have just kept getting better and better as the year went on. But I think he's done enough to be selected really well in the draft as well. So I don't worry about those guys being hurt for the draft, those 2 guys specifically, but I just feel bad for them that they lost out on the experience of having a full year of LSU. And, I just felt like our team was just ready to we'd already started making that turn. We figured out our lineup. Our pitching was outstanding. I think Bill sent some notes out about our season. Our team ERA was the lowest team ERA in the first 17 games of the year in LSU history, or at least since Bill's been keeping stats. What year was that, Bill? 1997 or something? You're on mute, Bill. Oh, I can't hear you. I don't know if you all can hear him or not, but anyway, they can check their notes if they have to. But, our pitching staff I thought was elite, and I thought our lineup was rounding into shape. We were playing a freshman behind the plate. We were playing freshman as our double play combination. Giovanni DiGiacomo was first year of playing center field for us, and I thought he was starting to make a turn for the better. I just felt like our team was really getting better, and as typically, our MO at LSU is that we get better as the year goes on. So we were a little bit under the radar, I think, and I liked it that way. And I know our guys were excited about going to Ole Miss, and it was going to be a great series. They were playing super, had won 16 in a row. It was going to be a phenomenal opportunity. And, so I think more than worrying about the draft for those kids, I think just the fact they lost out on all those experiences is the big thing. And I've, just tried to help guide them through mentally, being a psychologist with them, trying to help them deal with their disappointments. I don't hear anybody talking. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Coach, can you hear me? Aaron Fitt.
Hey, Aaron, what's going on,
Thank
man?
you.
Hi.
See you soon.
I had a quick question. I'm sorry if you've addressed this already. I didn't get on at the beginning, but
Okay.
I'm curious about your reaction to the NCAA Division I Council ruling and what you think the next step needs to be. I mean, do you think there needs to be some acknowledgement that there's going to be an additional roster crunch, if the draft is shortened and you've got an extra class of players coming in and more guys returning than you expected? What do you think is the ideal solution to this potential roster crunch?
Well, Aaron, I did discuss it earlier, but I'll be happy to talk about it again. The one thing about college baseball, depending on where you are in the country, is it's just very diverse as far as the caliber of players you have on your team with regard to the pro draft potential, and weather dictates it a lot, the resources that are put into the programs and so forth. So whereas a school, mid-major school in the north, whatever, they might have several seniors on their team because they don't necessarily have a lot of pro prospects in their program. Whereas the schools in the SEC and LSU, being one of those schools, we don't often have many seniors because your better players are signing after their junior year. So really our junior class is like most schools. I shouldn't say most, but a percentage of the schools, it's like their senior class. I only had 2 seniors on our team this year, 2 middle relief pitchers that were very vital to our team, but they weren't necessarily great pro prospects. And I'm happy that they're going to be able to come back and that they're not going to count. One's a non-scholarship kid and the other's on 25%. So it's not going to be a major financial thing for our school from a baseball standpoint. But where it really impacts us is the junior class. And especially with the draft, if the draft ends up only being 5 rounds, listen, I went into this year with the idea that probably 7 or 8 of our underclassmen were going to end up being drafted and sign and not be with us the following year. Okay. And now if we only have 5 rounds in the draft, we may only lose two of those players. So all of a sudden you got 5 or 6 guys that you didn't anticipate coming back next year. And then you can also say the same thing about your incoming class. So we have this class of 17 players and you're thinking, hey, you could end up losing 3 to 5 of them in the draft. Now you may only lose 1 or 2. So it's nobody's fault. And you might look at it as, well, you shouldn't have over-recruited, but you have to over-recruit in the SEC because your players are so good. You're going to end up losing so many players if you don't end up, accommodating that. Who are you going to beat the following year when you got a roster of 22 players? And we all do it. We have to do it. That's the double-edged sword of being at a school that gets good players. You're not going to have them for 4 years. So I think the NCAA made a really good decision, but I don't think it impacts baseball, especially baseball where we are, as much as if they could give us some relief with regard to the amount of scholarships and the roster size, not just exclusive of the seniors. And even if it's something just temporary, look, we'd all love to have 15 or 18 scholarships on a regular basis. But even if they just added a couple of scholarships for us to get through this next year and lift the lid on the 27 scholarship spots, then I think everybody can kind of get through this next year. And there's a lot of speculation on it really affecting us even 2 years from now, the juniors in high school or the sophomores in high school, but we can cross that bridge when the time comes. I've got kids that have signed scholarships with us in November, and they're planning on coming to LSU. Their high school careers were over. Plus, what do? Throw your juniors out on the curb because they weren't able to be drafted? I just think if the NCAA really wants to see this thing through all the way, then they have to look at baseball as a unique sport. I don't think softball or beach volleyball or some of the other sports have the same issues that we have in baseball, and they need to take a hard look at it, in my opinion.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Aaron.
Too.
Kendall was on here a little while ago. I don't know if he still is. Hi, Kendall.
We have time for a couple more questions if anyone has anything else.
Actually, Coach, I'll ask you a question. What if you could have a preferred model, because obviously the council is going to take a look at this here in the next couple of months, what they can do for baseball. But if you could have kind of your pick of a model that you think would actually pass the D1 Council, do you have any ideas on kind of a model that you would prefer for college baseball, or to be determined?
Well, there's already going to be inequities because some schools might have 9 seniors. I just told you I only have 2 seniors. There's already going to be inequities for next year. So I think the concept of a level playing field is kind of out the window, in the short term. And I think we should just treat our juniors the way that they're also treating the seniors. If you listen, these kids aren't going to just come back to school, and you can't increase their scholarship to try to entice them to come back. And if they get drafted and they want to sign, they're going to sign. And it's not that last year of schooling isn't going to be so attractive to them for them to lose, leverage in the draft or whatever. So I just wish they would treat our junior class the way that they're treating seniors. And if we just abide by those rules, I think then that helps it quite a bit. There's still going to be an issue with the kids coming in your recruiting class, but within every team, there's some other means of attrition. Some kids are going to transfer because they weren't playing enough, or, they didn't, think they were going to be in the plans or whatever. So I think for the most part, that'll work its way out. I just think we should have relief with the junior class, and I think that would be a big step forward. And that could end up being, a scholarship and a half, 2 scholarships, 3 scholarships at an individual school. And like the seniors, that doesn't mean that the school has to give them, the money. They, like, the seniors don't have to get it. I know there's lots of schools that aren't going to be able to afford to pay for their seniors again. We will be able to, and I think that's a good thing that we're going to be able to. But some schools that might have 8 or 9 seniors, and a school costs $70,000 a year, and the kids are all on 50%, they're not going to be able to afford to do that. So they're going to have some hard conversations. But if we did that with the juniors, and then it would, you might have to have some hard conversations there as well. I don't know if it's an unreasonable thing. I really haven't thought much about a plan. I let you guys think those things out. I try not to get too hopeful about stuff like that.
Coach Daniel Brown from KTBS in Shreveport. You mentioned speaking to your players to keep them, psychologically engaged, mentally focused. Is there anything you're telling them in particular to kind of keep them from not getting too downtrodden and focused on the negative? And what are you telling them in particular?
Well, I try. I don't try just to be a teacher when there's catastrophic events happening. Part of the biggest reason I went into coaching, in all honesty, was to be a teacher, to be somebody that could help guide young people, to teach them how to be successful today in baseball, but later on those qualities will help them in life. So, I try to share feelings with them and share, education with them all the way through their career. And one of the things, obviously, that we talk about a lot, especially in our sport, is how to deal with disappointment, deal with adversity, deal with failure, and not let it defeat you, and always keeping a positive attitude and so forth. And, and I tell the kids a lot of times, listen, life is not fair. Life is hard. You're going to have lots of things that happen to you in your life that are going to knock you on your rear end. And you have 2 choices. You can sit there and pout about it, or you can pick yourself up by the bootstraps and come back fighting and come back with a good positive attitude. This is what I do as a coach, and these are the things that we constantly are preaching to them. Now, I very readily admit that these are extraordinary circumstances that we're talking about now. But again, the NCAA is letting them have their year back of eligibility. Is it going to be a little bit of a stubbing of the toe where it might impact them a year from now in the draft or 2 years from now or whatever? Sure. Listen, I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to coach forever. You know, I'm on the backside of the mountain. So in a sense, I lost a year as well. You know, I don't know how much longer I'm going to coach, and this was one season I'm not going to get to have. So I can relate to how they feel because of my age. If I was, you know, a 30-year-old coach and I had 35 more years ahead of me, you know, it'd be different. But I'm not that at that point in my life. So I can really relate to how they feel. And again, I just try to explain to them that, look, if this is the worst thing that ever happens to you in your life, you're going to live a pretty good life. You know, we're going to come through this. Life will be back to hopefully what we remember as normal at some point. I can't say it's going to be soon. I don't know when it's going to be, but we're all going to deal with it, and we're going to come out in the end, and we're going to be okay. So those are really kind of the messages I just try to share with the kids to help them through. Whether it helps them or not, I can't tell you. I'm doing my best to try to help them.
One more question if anyone has something.
Terrell, are you trying to talk? Because you were muted. I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can, yeah. I saw your lips moving, but I couldn't hear you.
Thank you. This is Terrell with the Boot Sports. First off, I want to congratulate you on reaching the 600 win mark at LSU.
Thank you.
Great milestone. This is just wanted to change the subject to something here at the end of the press conference that I was curious about at the beginning of the season. And then, of course, with the season being cut short, I really didn't get to find an answer on it. Just about the safety at the box, the extended netting down the baseline. Is that something that was an LSU decision, or is that a new rule throughout the SEC, or was that like the doing from the NCAA?
No, it was an LSU decision. I don't think the NCAA is requiring that of any schools, but it's something I've been pushing for, quite frankly, for a while. And finally, we did it. You know, when you're standing on that top step of the dugout and that right-handed batter, you know, check swings one and it zips over my head, misses me by about 3 feet, and you know that ball's going into the stands at 100 miles an hour, and half the people are looking at their phones or there's little kids there, my heart would stop constantly. And, you know, Major League Baseball has taken a lot of initiative for the safety of the fans. I've attended Major League games that have had the netting in front of the fans like that, and it really didn't affect their ability to enjoy the game, watch the game, feel a part of the game, but they were safer. So I really pushed our administration to do it, and fortunately, you know, they did. And I think it's the right thing to have done. I think people can enjoy the game and relax without fear of getting drilled by a foul ball.
Yeah, agree. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Good to see you all.
Appreciate it. We will send this recording out here shortly and let y'all know of any other Zoom press conferences that we'll do in the future.
If you want the same wallpaper that I have in my bedroom, Ron, I'll get you some. Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
See you guys. Y'all be safe. Take care.